The LA Kings looked to stay perfect on the road as they start a new month, but what did we learn about the Kings from October? That and more on this on the road edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I am Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the last 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in a bonus bet with any $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Well, we do have an episode today. It may be a little bit interesting. I am in New York City on vacation, getting ready to get our vacation started. We've got a game tonight at Madison Square Garden to see the New York Rangers play the Carolina Hurricanes. So there's a hockey part of this vacation as well. The lighting probably is not as good as it is normally, and so on and so forth. But hopefully you will bear with us. Getting you a show on vacation. So there's that. As far as the LA Kings, looking to improve to 5-0 on this on the road this season, extending what would be a franchise record winning streak to start the season as far as road wins. They're taking on the Ottawa Senators tonight. So far, the Kings have posted road wins at Winnipeg 5-1, at Minnesota 7-3, at Arizona 5-4, and at Toronto in their last game 4-1. We're going to get more into this Kings matchup against the Senators. It has some pretty interesting storylines in it. But we're going to start off, I thought, since the month of October has now left us, we're now in November. What were some of the big questions we had for the LA Kings going into the season, and how have they looked at this point of the season? I know it's just 1 month in, and it wasn't even a full month of action, just 9 games. But still, we had questions going into the season. Some of them have sort of been answered. Some of them will continue to be answered. But I thought it might be interesting to look back on what I had as far as questions for the Kings going into the season and how those questions have been answered at this point. So the biggest question I had for the LA Kings going into the season was, what was the future of their head coach? At the time, Todd McLellan was going into the final year of his 5-year extension. And I had said, really, no need to sign him to an extension really going into the season, because I think everybody knew the reality of his situation, including him, that this was kind of a make or break season for him, whether that's fair or not. He had gotten the team obviously to the playoffs 2 years in a row, but 2 first-round exits. And with what the Kings have invested, with how much they've spent, with the moves they've made, obviously, they're not just looking to get in the playoffs anymore. As we all know, they're looking to get into the playoffs, advance into the playoffs, and ultimately be in the running to win a Stanley Cup. So that's the pressures on Todd McLellan. It's the pressures on the players right now. Of course, the players most of them are signed to an extension beyond this year, so they've got more years to get it done. But for Todd McLellan going into the season, he was basically coaching for his job. Well, turns out, since then and now, Todd McLellan has signed a 1-year extension with the team. So he has, it really is just, it's not much of a vote of confidence, a 1-year extension. The Kings are basically saying, what is, I think, the truth, that Todd McLellan has done a good job so far, but the expectations are obviously much higher. And so a coaching change still is not out of the question at all. Now, the good news for the Kings is I think they've gotten off to a good start. It's not great. It could be a little bit better, but I think it's along the lines of what we expected, to be honest with you. I didn't think the Kings would come out and be one of the top 3 teams in the NHL necessarily at this point. especially with a couple of new additions, the goaltending, PL Dubois coming in. But I think they've been good to very good so far. Definitely already in a playoff position where we expect them to be. So anyway, the 1-year extension for Todd McClellan, I think that it doesn't change anything. It basically just says to him, we appreciate what you've done so far. If it ends up not working out in the end, well, you get an extra year of pay for thank you for what you've done to this point, which has been good enough, but not exactly where we want you to be. So that question really hasn't been answered from the beginning of the year to now. After the first month of the season, Tom McClellan is still basically coaching for his job for next season. If he can get the Kings into the playoffs, if they can advance out of the first round and beyond, then I think you're looking at a maybe adding multi-years on an extension because of that. But we'll see. So another question we had about the Kings going in was the penalty kill. Was it going to be a positive this year, or was it going to be a negative? It was a negative last year. We knew that this is something that had to change. Last year, they were ranked 24th in the NHL, 75.8%. That needed to get a lot better if they were going to do what they wanted to do, which was to advance in the playoffs. That penalty kill was not good enough to advance this team into the playoffs. We talked about Todd McClellan. He made it a priority. He said in the exit interviews that the answers were in the room. In other words, that the people that were on the staff were the guys who were going to get it done and could get it done, in his opinion. And Trent Yawney is the other guy that he didn't mention by name, but referenced because one of the assistant coaches of the Kings, he runs the defense and he runs the power play, or excuse me, the penalty kill. So it was him and Todd McClellan needing to get this thing fixed. So far, it has absolutely been a positive for the LA Kings. And my opinion was before the season, I was going to have to see it to believe it. So far, I'm believing it. The Kings penalty kill right now is ranked 9th in the NHL, operating at 84.4%. Last year, it was at 75.8%. So again, it's a small sample size, but so far through this first month of the season, the penalty kill has been a positive, not a negative. So give credit where credit is due. Credit Todd McClellan, credit Trent Yawney. So far, so good. They've gotten the job done. And I don't see, with the power play, you can understand how with Victor Arvidsson being out injured, you can understand with Pierre-Luc Dubois coming in, you can understand with Jordan Spence now running the second unit and with Sean Durzi gone, you could see there's some reasons why. And a friend of the show, Russell Morgan, when he was on with us, talked about the lack of right-handed shots on that. They've talked about that in the broadcasts as well, where that's been a factor where the Kings power play has kind of been one-sided. So there are reasons why the power play hasn't been clicking the way it did last year, but the penalty, I think that can improve. The penalty kill, I think it is what it is. Now, other teams can get a look at what the Kings strategy is and maybe work off of that, but I think the style of the PK, what they're doing, how they're being aggressive, I don't think that is going to go away. I think what we've seen so far is what we can see all season. So I'm pretty confident that the Kings have fixed the power play, and again, that it will be good enough at this point to get them where they want to go. The power play, though, is going to have to improve as we go forward. So another question I had going into the season, and we're now answering after 1 month of the season, was the goaltending. How would Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley hold up so far? Well, so far, I think Talbot has done a good job. 4-2-1, 2.47 goals against average, 914 save percentage. I think the numbers are all very respectable. And for me, Cam Talbot has passed the eye test. I think he's looked pretty good. He's healthy. He's doing what he needs to do to give the Kings a chance to win every night. However, the same cannot be said for Phoenix Copley. At this point, 3 starts, 1-0-1, 4.98 goals against average, 788 save percentage. Now, is it possible Cam Talbot at 36 years old could be a number one goalie and play 50 plus, get 50 plus starts this year and be good and be ready and fresh to go in the playoffs? It's possible. Is it likely? I would say that's not likely. So we're going to need Phoenix Copley to pull some of the rope this season and help Cam Talbot to be fresher come biggest part of the season, playoff time. Or maybe it's David Rittich. I don't know. He's obviously in the AHL right now, but he's an NHL veteran. He's looked pretty good. He looked pretty good in the preseason. He has looked good so far in his brief time with the Ontario Reign. So whether it's Phoenix Copley or it's David Riddick, one of those guys is going to have to help Cam Talbot enough down the stretch. Again, I think Talbot has looked good so far after 1 month, but he's going to need some help going forward. A couple other questions that we need to answer involving the LA Kings, which we had going into the season, and we can answer them after 1 month. We're going to do that and more, continuing this on the road in New York with Locked On LA Kings. We'll do that next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Trevor Moore scores a hat trick and the LA Kings win the Stanley Cup. Sounds good, right? Well, you know what else sounds good? You winning 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app. As the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, Sleeper is our top choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you pick players based on goals, assists, points, saves, and more. And Sleeper offers 100 times payouts. And although we love the NHL, it's not just about hockey. You've also got the NFL going on into full swing, college football going on as well. And the NBA is underway as well. So you've got lots of options. It is a great time to get in on all the amazing sports action. Make the right picks, and you can win big. Just use the promo code Locked On NHL, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is Locked On NHL. Use Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, a few more questions to answer before we move on from the beginning of the year to now after the first month of the season. Another question I had going into the year was, what would the Pierre-Luc Dubois effect be on the lineup? And so far, so good. I'm not saying that he, there hasn't been a little bit of a transition period, but it's hard to say that his insertion into the lineup hasn't been a positive effect. Now, how much of it has been him? I guess it's hard to say exactly, but the fact is that with him in the lineup, the Kings are leading the NHL in average goals per game at 4.33. LA is second in the NHL in total goals scored with 39. Now, that's one less than Detroit, but the Red Wings have played one more game than the LA Kings. Head coach Tom McClellan said it recently after the win in Toronto that his job's pretty easy right now because he's just rolling out 4 lines and he doesn't have to worry about mixing and matching, not worrying about the lineups. All 4 lines are playing so well that it's just put them out there and let them do their thing. Certainly, PL Dubois' addition to the top 6 has, I think, made things easier for everyone a little bit. But also his teammates deserve a lot of credit too. They've pulled their weight and then some. So how much of it is Pierre-Luc Dubois in the lineup? I don't know. But I think the question of how would he affect the lineup, I think he has definitely positively affected the lineup of the LA Kings. I don't know that there's much question about that. How much of it is his insertion in the lineup? Not totally sure, but I think he's definitely been a positive so far for the LA Kings. And finally, who was going to be the young player that was going to kind of break out and help the Kings? I had said I thought it would be, and he's not a rookie to be sure, but he's a younger player, Arthur Kaliev, who's been in the league a couple of years, but I thought it was finally time for him to break out, and he's been okay so far. And I thought Brandt Clark would start the year with the Kings. Thought he would be somehow part of the rotation, but that hasn't happened yet. And the way Jordan Spence is playing, I'm not sure exactly when it's going to happen. We talked about this a little bit with Russell Morgan as well. Right now, Brandt Clark is getting a lot of ice time in the AHL, and that's a good thing. Right now, that's probably benefiting him more than being on the third pairing and not getting as much ice time. I think, though, at some point this season, I think that may have to change. But I don't know. It's going to be a tough because Jordan Spence has done a good job. You want to be loyal to a guy who's been there before, but at the same time, this is not college or high school sports. It's not just about rewarding loyalty. It's got to be about who are the best players on the ice that can help you win. And I think Brandt Clark has a little bit more to give offensively, a little bit more dynamic, can be kind of a game-changing type of player. But again, that's a decision to be made later in the season. As far as the young player who is going to step in and help out after the first month, I don't know how you can't say it's Alex Laferriere. And that certainly came out of nowhere. I certainly did not see this coming. I don't think anybody else did. As much as we liked Alex Laferriere and thought this was a guy who could help the Kings in the future, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be this season. Probably not even him, probably not even the coaching staff. But things have opened up for him, as we talked about on a previous show. Victor Arvidsson getting hurt, Samuel Fagemo being claimed off waivers, the suspension for the first few games for Arthur Kaliev opened up a spot for Alex Laferriere, and the rookie out of Harvard has absolutely taken advantage of the opportunity and has been very good for the LA Kings so far. So to kind of wrap it up, looking through the first month of the season, now that October is gone, how do we look at the LA Kings? And I would have to say, pretty surprised at the balance scoring the Kings have had. Just up and down the lineup, everybody contributing, which is great. I didn't think it would be quite this good. So that's certainly a positive, especially with Victor Arvidsson out. The penalty kill has been better than I've expected, so that's been good. Again, a little bit disappointed with how the power play is going so far, but I think that could be corrected and at least be better. It may not be top 10 like it was last year, but somewhere around 10 to 15, I think would be good enough. If the penalty kill holds up the way it is, that the special teams would be an asset for the LA Kings. Right now, the Kings are, if you look at the entire NHL, they are the 8th best team in the NHL right now as far as points scored with 12. Fifth best in the Western Conference. That's kind of where I thought the Kings would be, frankly, after the first month. A team that was definitely in a playoff position, a team that was amongst the better teams in the NHL and the Western Conference. But I didn't see them being like a top 5 team in the NHL or a top 3 team in the West. Right now, again, they're 5th in the Western Conference and again, 8th in the NHL. I think that's about right. I think that's about where I thought they would be. I do think they can get better on that. But the only thing I'm surprised about as far as standings and points and those things like that is that the Kings are in 3rd place in the Pacific Division. I thought they would be probably 2nd place in the Pacific at this point in the season, but they're only a couple points behind Vancouver. We'll see if the Canucks can keep that surprising start going or not. Coming up tonight, as I mentioned, the LA Kings are in Ottawa to take on the Senators, and some interesting storylines going into this game involving the Kings and the Senators. And it starts with the potential goalie matchup, and that would be Cam Talbot for the LA Kings and Joonas Korpisalo for the Ottawa Senators. Of course, Talbot played in Ottawa last year, now the Kings starting goalie. He did not play great in Ottawa. He was playing for a team that wasn't very good, and he struggled with injury issues as well. So it wasn't a great season in Ottawa for Cam Talbot. So he's back now, a little something to prove, facing his old team. And then there's Joonas Korpisalo, who the Kings, of course, picked up at the trade deadline last year, decided not to re-sign him, especially when you saw what he did sign for in Ottawa, 5 years, $20 million. The Kings are not going to be able to offer that. And frankly, I don't know that I would want to give Joonas Korpisalo, with all due respect, a 5-year contract. That the Senators have been rolling the dice on their goaltenders over the last few years. They had Matt Murray come in from Pittsburgh. That didn't work out. They tried Cam Talbot. That didn't work out. So they've gone with Joonas Korpisalo. So far on the season, mixed results. He's 2-3 in 6 games, 3.22 goals against average, .902 save percentage. So I would say so far not quite what they were hoping for. But it will be an interesting matchup to see former Senators goalie Cam Talbot, if he starts for the Kings, which is expected, but we'll see. And then Joonas Korpisalo, briefly the former King, going up against his old team. It's not a lot of bad blood, though, in this, as far as when Cam Talbot played Minnesota earlier this year. I think there was something there for him. He was motivated to beat his old team, who didn't think he could get it done for them. And he demanded a trade out of Minnesota. He got his wish, went to Ottawa, didn't work out, but now he's with the LA Kings. Also, there's the Quinton Byfield, Tim Stützle situation. That is an old storyline that a lot of Kings fans probably aren't necessarily all that interested in, because it hasn't worked out for the Kings. But if you don't remember, Quinton Byfield was the number 2 pick overall by the Kings in 2020. Tim Stützle could have been an option for the Kings. They decided to go with Byfield. Stützle then went number 3 overall to Ottawa, and Stützle has been the much better player. He's been one of the top players for Ottawa ever since he joined them. 75 goals, 187 points in 218 games, as opposed to Quinton Byfield, 10 goals, 39 points in 108 games. Stützle has clearly been the better player. Now, Byfield is starting to kind of put it together, and I think there is still time for him to be a very important player and an asset for the LA Kings, but there's no question if you're comparing the two that Tim Stützle has been the much better player, and that the Kings did not make the right selection. That doesn't mean that Quinton Byfield can't still be a very good player for the LA Kings going forward, but I mean, it is what it is. If you're looking at the draft, who was better, Stützle or Byfield? It's been Tim Stützle. So the Ottawa Senators are happy with the selection. I think ultimately in the end, the Kings will be happy with the selection, but that Quinton Byfield, Tim Stützle storyline, certainly it's a factor. Anytime you see the Senators play the LA Kings, it's impossible not to think about that situation. A couple more storylines involving tonight's game. We will get to you with that in just a second here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. When you're running a fantasy draft and putting together a fantasy team, do you wish you could handpick the best stars for your team? Well, that's what it is, right? That's what the point of it is, a fantasy draft. Well, do you wish you could do that for your business team as well? Actually, you can with Indeed. You can build your talent roster. They've got a great hiring platform. You can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when all you need to do is go to Indeed. Indeed does the hard work for you. Sponsor a job, and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description right when you post. With Indeed, you can start hiring fast. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. And Indeed knows that you're growing your own business. You have to make every dollar count. And that's why Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. And this episode also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than now. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. LA Kings play the Ottawa Senators tonight, 4 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of the LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Another interesting storyline for the Kings Senators coming up tonight. You may recall Jakob Chychrun is now playing for the Ottawa Senators. He, of course, was the main focus for a lot of people coming to the LA Kings to solve the issue the Kings had on their left side defensively. And it seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. We did a couple episodes, certainly, about Jakob Chychrun coming to LA. Obviously, that did not happen. The Kings ultimately decided to go with Vladislav Gavrikov and Jonas Korpisalo at the trade deadline last year. They end up re-signing Gavrikov. I'm very happy with what he's done. Jakob Chychrun eventually ended up being traded to the Ottawa Senators, so we'll see him tonight. And last year, he got hurt. But so far this year for Ottawa, Chychrun has looked very good. He's off to a strong start. 4 goals, 4 assists through 8 games. So Jakob Chychrun did not end up being an LA King, ended up playing in Ottawa. So there's that little storyline tonight between the Kings and the Senators as well. Real quick for the Ottawa Senators. They are still in a rebuild, just kind of doing a scouting report on them. They have missed the playoffs 6 straight seasons. They're currently 4-4 on the season, 8 points. They've been okay, at least competitive in the Atlantic Division, although they are in last place in their division, but the division is really good. It's not, when you say they're in last place, it's not like the Sharks in the Pacific. If they go on a little bit of a winning streak, they could certainly move up the standings, but it's a tough division that they play in. But some interesting news so far this year for the Ottawa Senators, some drama off the ice, if you will. They just fired their general manager, Pierre Dorian, who had been on the job for the past 8 years. The move came after the Senators were stripped by the NHL of the future first-round pick for what happened was they had traded a player, Evgeny Dadonov, to the Vegas Golden Knights. And apparently they didn't make it clear that Dadonov had a no trade clause. So Vegas eventually wanted to trade him to Anaheim. Then they found out that he had this limited no trade clause. And so the Ducks were on his list of teams he didn't want to go to. So after they had consummated this trade with the Ducks, they found out, from his agent, no, he can't go there. You can't send him there. He has a limited no trade clause, which Ottawa didn't let them know about to begin with. So they ended up having to void that trade. Now, they did eventually trade him to another team. I can't remember where they sent him. But needless to say, the Ducks weren't happy about it. The Golden Knights weren't happy about it. They filed a complaint with the NHL. The NHL has now eventually ruled on that. And again, they've stripped the Ottawa Senators of a future first-round pick over this. The Senators have new ownership this season. And so Pierre Dorion wasn't their guy to begin with, but they didn't make a change because he'd done an okay job overseeing the rebuild for the Senators. But after this, they were like, no, we're not going to keep you around. You're not our guy anyway. This is embarrassing that this happened. You needed to make this clear. You didn't do your job. And so they fired their general manager, Pierre Dorion, just the other day. So that'll be interesting that there's some turmoil going on behind the scenes a little bit with Ottawa. Don't know if that will affect anything on the ice, but that's a big story for the Ottawa Senators. Another big story for them this year has been one of their players, Shane Pinto, is a guy who's been suspended 41 games for violating gambling issues. And so I believe the league announced that he didn't bet on NHL games. But as far as I know, this is the first kind of suspension involving an NHL player and violating gambling rules. Of course, gambling, as you know, we've talked about FanDuel, our friends on this show. It's a big deal in the NHL these days and in all sports with the legalizing of gambling that has gone on. But as players, you're not allowed to be involved in any of that. So Shane Pinto, 41 game suspension for the Ottawa Senators. So it's been an interesting year so far for Ottawa. I do want to mention real quick, we had the very unfortunate incident, obviously tragic incident with Adam Johnson, former player for the Ontario Reign, former player for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who was tragically killed in an incident playing in England when he got hit in the neck with a skate blade. Obviously, this has had a lot of impact in the NHL, and I just wanted to mention that we're seeing now the wheels moving as far as players wearing neck guards to protect themselves over some sort of unlikely but catastrophic type of injury that could happen because obviously they're wearing very sharp blades on their skates. So I saw the Western Hockey League, one of the top junior leagues in Canada, is making the neck guards mandatory. I know the English League, the English Pro League, has made them mandatory after this. And there are some other leagues. There's some other teams. The Pittsburgh Penguins have made it mandatory for all of their players in the ECHL and AHL to wear neck guards as well. So the Adam Johnson incident was obviously tragic. There are now trying to be positive repercussions going forward. It's like a Kevlar kind of a thing that goes around your neck, almost kind of like a headband around your neck that can help prevent something like this from happening. I don't know if there's anything that can make it 100% safe when you're involving things like this, but kind of the legacy perhaps of Adam Johnson is players eventually using this protective equipment to try and prevent something like that from ever happening again, which we're certainly all in favor of. We saw with visors, if you're an older fan like me, there were, players didn't have to wear visors. Now that's been grandfathered in going through the lower levels of hockey. And now it's something that a lot of players don't even think about. It's pretty much mandatory. There may be a couple of guys still left in the NHL where they've grandfathered this in, but the wheels are turning. I don't know if they're going to make this mandatory in the NHL anytime soon, but if everybody in the lower levels and the minor leagues are wearing them, then obviously it's not going to be a big deal for players to wear them in the NHL. And with technology, what it is, they're starting to make these things, more comfortable, lighter, not as bulky. And so players will maybe be more receptive to wearing these neck guards going forward. So that could be the legacy of Adam Johnson. That is going to do it for today's show on the road here in New York. Not the greatest situation, but hopefully you guys are okay with what we're doing. Looking forward tomorrow to talking about hopefully another Kings road win, staying perfect on the road as they take on the Ottawa Senators. For those of you that are everydayers that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, we are going to have a recap of the Senators game coming up tomorrow, and also try and read some of your emails and comments on a Friday fan feedback show. The email address is always lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, and you can always leave your comments in the YouTube comment section as well if you're watching on YouTube. Love for you to stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for joining me on vacation for this episode of Locked On LA Kings. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings go.